Hello, welcome to session 5 of the 8-session workshop on story composition, making up stories. So today we're going to apply some of the thinking that we've reviewed on dramatic structure and creating characters. We're going to apply it to 5 stories. Number 1 is going to be Shakuntala, which is an episode from the Mahabharata. And then Fish Brother, a folktale from Tamil Nadu. Then Cinderella, the most popular fairy tale in the world. Rumpelstiltskin, another fairy tale, and a story written by Lalitha Tilak, Change Begins at Home. And, as I've said many times already in this workshop, when we create, we shouldn't follow any pattern, any formula. We should just let the material shape itself. But along the way, it is interesting to, it can be interesting to look at, theories and observations that people have made over the thousands of years of thinking about stories. So as I give summaries of these stories, please don't judge me as a storyteller, because we've had such wonderful storytelling today, and what I'm going to be doing is not really storytelling. It's just going to be for information purposes, telling about what happened in the stories. So please don't judge me as a storyteller. Okay, I think before we try to see if these principles appear in the stories, let's just review the principles themselves. And I will go on to screen share. Yes, here we go. Screen share. Here we are. I hope you can see dramatic structure, character development in yellow. Yes? Do you see some words in yellow with yellow background? Yep. Okay, this is just a review of thinking, especially about stories from movies, because that's the literature that I've been looking at lately. Since I've written a movie, which I'm trying to get produced, I have movies on my mind. But I am trying to posit that these ideas relate to any story, regardless of how it's shared. Okay, so there's 2 categories that have come up in this thinking. One is dramatic structure, one is character development. And I want to say at the very beginning, what has emerged to me most of all in this thinking and researching is that on one level, stories really are about the way characters learn, mature, or don't. But if they do, mature, transform, rise to the occasion. If they do, then they'll say, I didn't know I had it in me, but somehow it was in them. And if it was in them to, face the challenge that they're facing, then they're different because they know that they're capable of overcoming big challenges. So that is part of the transformation of the character, that the character knows, if I apply myself, if I keep my head, I can work wonders. Okay, so that's has to do with character development, but first let's take a look at dramatic structure. People talk about the hook. That is something that happens at the very beginning of a story that is supposed to really grab the attention on an emotional level, something that is very intriguing. It might involve a lot of action. So the listeners or readers or viewers are going to say, hey, what is this? And why did this happen? And what's going to happen next? So you are hooked into wondering, what is this? Because of course, the basic principle of art is that we identify with what we see on the stage, in the book, on the screen, on the stage. we identify, and we're imagining it's happening to us. So the hook is where something happens out of the blue, and if it's a book, you can't put it down. It's a page turner because you're so intrigued, and you want to know, why did this happen and how did this happen? Okay, so so people talk about the hook, and that begins to tell us in this story what is at stake in this story. What is at risk? I'm a firm believer, especially with storytelling, of letting your listeners know as from the get-go what is really at stake here. Why should we listen? Where are we going with this? What hopes are raised? What fears are raised? Very related to the hook, maybe the hook is the inciting incident. Some incident that happens that really sets the story in motion. Maybe a balance in the world is lost, or an imbalance is exposed. But the inciting incident, once that happens, we're not going to be satisfied until justice is done, until balance is restored somehow. So of course we talk and think about suspense, dramatic tension. Each action causes a reaction. So when there's an action, where we imagine what the reaction is going to be. One foot goes, the other foot is going to fall. So we will not be satisfied until our expectation is fulfilled. So it may be a matter of seeking justice or completeness or feeling at peace, but the suspense is what we now expect and hope is going to happen. How is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Along the way now, there may be a need for some exposition. Exposition is when a character or the narrator gives the background telling what happened up to this point. The exposition should not be boring, which is often a criticism of exposition. In the Tempest, which we'll be looking at next week, tomorrow, there's a famous exposition in the Tempest near the beginning where the father explains to his daughter why they're on an island in the middle of the ocean, why they've been there for 13 years. But along the way, he's explaining it to the audience. In fact, he probably explained it to his daughter many times over those 13 years, but that's the exposition there. So exposition is a piece of business that has to be done in a seamless way without boring people. Then there's talk about rising action, and I like the metaphor. It's a gathering storm. Because of the incident, the inciting incident, things are developing, and a storm is gathering. Maybe a conflict is building. The plot thickens. I love that expression. I think it's based on food, isn't it? When you're cooking, sometimes the sauce thickens or something thickens. But it's because of complications and implications and excitement, and what is story is really all about is coming into focus. Okay, the most famous model for story is that there's a problem and there's going to be a solution, or there's not going to be a solution. That the character wants something and the story is going to be about, does the character get it or not? That's a simple cliche that is still, as far as I know, the leading simple idea behind story analysis. The term pinch is used with cinema writers. It means getting pinched. A problem comes up. The things are going along, but then you're stopped in your tracks. Or the main character. I've written MC for main character. I don't like to say protagonist. It's a little abstract. So I see MC for main character. There are pinches along the way where things go off track, things get delayed, the progress is halted. So there are twists and turns. Then, according to some, there's going to be a moment where all seems to be lost, kaput, crushed. A metaphor is the darkest hour of the night. But then maybe there's resilience, recovery, and the things move on. And then finally, the big confrontation with the antagonistic elements. Antagonist just means things that prevent the main character from getting what the main character wants. It's not a villain. It's just a blockage element in the story. And when we get to character development, as we will in a moment, it turns out that every antagonistic element is an opportunity for character growth. If the character can overcome, that's a positive. And then at the very end, the term falling action refers to now things have changed. Perhaps the character has risen to the occasion and has done something she never dreamed she could do. And now she and everyone else is going to adjust to this new reality. Okay, regarding character development, two things that can happen is the character's nature may be gradually revealed. It doesn't change, it's just our perception of it changes as it's revealed, or the character actually may grow, develop, and transform. And again, my working feeling is that the number one thing stories are about is the psychological growth and transformation of the main characters, where they rise to the occasion, and then they know they can rise to the occasion. So they have a sense of self-confidence that they never had before and cannot be taken away from them. Individuation is a term made famous by Carl Jung, the psychologist, about becoming more aware of aspects of oneself, even seemingly negative aspects of oneself, and also getting a sense of who one is in relation to society, history, and the universe. This can be part of the growth and development of a character. If a character is kind, generous, and humble, allies and helpers may appear. You know, we all know the basic idea, the good you do comes back to you. Treat others as you would like to be treated. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. These things happen in stories. There's a point in a story, perhaps, where the main character, at first she's been floating and reacting, but at a certain point she crosses a threshold and really commits to doing something, and crosses a point of no return. And that's where the plot really thickens, and we're heading towards the big moment. Some people talk about the distinction between the wants and needs of characters. A want is a character wants something, and that involves the plot. You know, they want something and they're going to get it or not. A need has to do with their internal development, their maturity. And I'm saying I feel that maturity is the biggest story in a story. We might also keep an eye out for how a story relates to the present day local and global conditions. And of course, in what ways does the story give inspiration? In what ways does the story give warning? Okay, before we move to the actual stories, would anyone like to say anything? Has anything crossed your mind in this last 10 minutes that you'd like to share? I think all of you know all this stuff already, right? But it's okay to have a review of it. Okay, let's go on to the first story, which is Shakuntala. For those of you who don't know the story, I'll review it very simply. There's a young woman who lives in an ashram in the forest. Her father is the head of the ashram. And one day the local prince is in the forest hunting, and he's following a deer, and the deer leads him to the ashram. And he sees the young lady, they fall in love. And they're married, and soon after, he gets called back to the court. But she's pregnant, and they decide she should not travel at that point. But he says he'll send for her soon, and he gives her a ring, as a symbol of their relationship and love. And he goes back to court, and she doesn't hear from him for quite some time. So she and her father decide to go and visit the court. But before that, she loves to weave flowers. And she gets so engrossed in weaving the flowers and imagining putting a garland over her husband's head that she doesn't notice when a certain holy man walks out of the forest and appears, and he asks for some water, and she doesn't hear him because she's engrossed in weaving the flowers. This is a holy man with a very bad temper. So he's furious, and he curses her. He says, the person you're making those flowers for, that person won't even know you. She's shocked, she's horrified, her friends are horrified, and they beg the holy man to take back the curse, but he says, no, I'm sorry, once said cannot be unsaid, but if you show him something that he gave you, he'll remember you. And she says, oh, it's okay, I have his ring. So, okay, so she and her father travel to the court. They have to cross a lake, and she's playing with her hand in the water, and the ring that her husband gave her slips off her finger down into the water. And so when they get to the court, the king doesn't recognize her because of the curse. And she's crushed, and she leaves with her father, and she goes with her infant son deep, deep into the forest on her own to live alone with her son. Sometime later, a fisherman finds that the fish who swallowed the ring in the lake, and cuts open the fish and sees the ring, takes it to the king. Now the king remembers that his wife had come, and he goes searching for her. He finds deep in the forest, the boy is now a young boy, and the king comes upon the boy looking into the mouth of a tiger and counting the tiger's teeth. The tiger is friendly. And the king asks the boy, who are you? Who are your parents? And the boy says, I am the son of my mother and the king. And the king says, I'm the king. And so he realizes he's found his wife and his son, and they live happily. Okay, so in that story, do we have a hook? Do we have a inciting incident? Do we have anything like that? I think the deer leading the king to the ashram is that's the first element there. And then well, I guess that she doesn't hear the holy man, and that he curses her. That's the big inciting incident. First that she marries the king, and then he leaves, and then she gets cursed. And then, she so much wants her family to come together, but when it proves not possible, she makes a very bold step. She doesn't just go back to her father's ashram. She goes deep, deep into the forest, into the mountains, to live alone with her son. So at that moment, she has crossed a threshold. She's no longer a protected young lady, the daughter of somebody and the wife of somebody. She goes off on her own with nature, maybe because she's so bitter or crushed or disappointed with life that she just goes off to be with nature. But luckily, her husband follows her. Does anyone else see any other elements of this, of the principles that I've mentioned? Does anyone see any of the principles in this story? I'm not going to continue until someone says something. Mary, I see something on the tip of your tongue. No? You're on mute. Mary Louise, I know you like to be called by Mary Louise.
Oh, that's okay. No, I was just trying to go back over my mind. What are those principles he was talking about? And just.
Well, there's a point of no return. At the beginning, there's the hook and the inciting incident. Then there's a point of no return, and the all is lost moment. There are a couple of all is lost moments in there. When she loses the ring, when she gets cursed, she loses the ring. The king doesn't recognize her. Those are all is lost moments.
Yeah. You had a term for one of that with it, and that they use in screenplays. You had a term for that.
The darkest night, the darkest hour of the night.
No, what was it called? Where little things that come along that get in the way, like losing the ring gets in the way.
Oh, then an antagonistic moment or an antagonist.
Oh, it was a word I wasn't familiar with, so I can't remember it.
Oh, well, if it comes to you, tell us. But we know what you mean. These are complications, setbacks, a pinch.
Pinch, that's it.
A pinch.
A pinch. Losing the ring was like a pinch.
Yes. But the thing is that these pinches end up challenging the character so that the character, does great things that the character would not do without that pinch.
Yeah.
So, and all of this thought about characters, especially coming out of people in the cinema world, most of it came out of Hollywood in the 60s and 70s. So it's all very related to the New Age movement and ideas about the psychological transformations you and I and every human being is going through or should go through. So it's not just about characters in movies, this thinking. It's about real life characters like you and me. So, we all know when bad things happen, don't lose your head. Don't panic. Don't get depressed. See it as a challenge. Right? Okay. Any other thoughts about this story in relation to all these ideas, or should we move on? June, do I see a thought crossing your face? You're on mute.
The thought is to move on.
Okay, very good. Okay, so now the second one, Fish Brother, a folktale from Tamil Nadu. Here's Lalitha, the author of the story we'll consider last. Fish Brother is a folktale here in Tamil Nadu. There was like 7 siblings, 1 sister and 6 brothers, and one of the brothers happened to be a fish. He lived in the river, which separated the home of the human family from their agricultural field. So every day, the 5 of the brothers had to cross the river to go to the field. And every day, the sister brought balls of rice to the brothers in the field. And she crossed the river because her brother, the fish, gave her a ride on his back. And she would also give him a ball of rice. One day, she did not have enough rice. So she thought, well, this one brother, he's only a fish. Okay, I'll make a ball of mud and I'll put a few grains of rice around the outside of the mud. Maybe he won't know the difference. So she gives that mud ball to the fish eats it, and the fish doesn't like it. He's not a mud eater. So he jerks in such a way, partly on purpose, that she's standing on his back as they're going across the river, and he does it in such a way that he cuts her foot rather severely with his fin. So she has a bloody foot, and she says to her 5 brothers when they get to the other side, look what a brother did to me. He cut my foot. And so the five brothers, who were not so excited about having a fish brother anyway, they grab the fish and kill him and bury him there right on the side of the river. Years pass, and the sister, it's time for her to get married, but she needs flowers, you know, for the wedding, and for some reason flowers were not growing in the area, and she couldn't find any flowers, and people remembered that a beautiful flower bush was growing where the fish brother had been buried. So they went there, and sure enough, there were flowers in that bush. So they picked them, and a garland was made for the bride. But as soon as it was put on her, these were little white flowers. They immediately turned. They went bad, and smelled bad, and lost their proper color. So and there's a tradition in Tamil Nadu that if flowers are put on an unworthy person, they wilt immediately. So so the mother of the family understood the situation, and she said to her daughter, "Listen, you've got to go to that flower bush. That flower bush is your fish brother, incarnated. You've got to go and apologize." So the sister goes and she says, "Dear brother, I'm really sorry about what happened. I was wrong to give you that ball of mud. I didn't have enough rice that day. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't behave correctly, and I really apologize. I'm sorry." So the bush fish brother said, "All right, you're forgiven." And this time when flowers were picked, they remained beautiful when they were put on her, and the wedding went fine. Okay, so that story. Do we have a hook or an inciting incident? Yes, we do. Well, first, that there's a fish brother. That should have gotten you a little, your ear should have perked up. But most of all, that she feeds her fish brother a ball of mud, and he cuts her foot, and then he's killed. That's the, you know, that's the hook and the inciting incident in one. And then things develop, and there's a pinch when she tries to get flowers for her wedding and she can't get them. And then I guess there's some character development in a positive way when she apologizes with the encouragement from her mother. Anyone else have any thoughts about that story in light of the ideas we've been talking about? Is there suspense in the story? I don't know. Once the fish brother is killed and buried, we kind of think he's finished, right? We don't really know that there's going to be any second act for him. Is there a all seems to be lost moment? Well, when the fish gets killed, I guess all seems to be lost for him. And when the daughter can't, flowers are a serious thing here in South India. You cannot have a wedding without flowers. So when she can't get flowers, that's pretty serious. Anybody, any thoughts about that story and any of the dramatic ideas we've been talking about? Mary Louise.
I wish it had been a little bit more like after she had got the flowers, because when she apologized, I'm sorry to say, it reminded me of in Canada here, at least, if a politician, you know, says something nasty to somebody else, or forgets to tell people they made this much money or whatever, they usually do the crocodile tears, and they go, "Oh, I'm really apologize." And the only reason they apologize is because they've been found out. And And it almost seems like too simple, too easy an ending. Maybe she would go back and revisit that story and keep it going a little bit longer. I'm not sure what she would do, but
Well, please tell that story, and I'll send you the link to the written version we have.
okay, okay.
And please tell it better than I did.
Oh,
I
no,
did,
no, it's not that you didn't tell it
yes,
properly.
yes, please. I did my best to make her apology sincere, because I
Okay,
believe it's
okay.
sincere. But you're right. She had to apologize to get the flowers. But in my vision of the story, she's also sincere.
Okay.
June?
Well, I agree with Mary a little bit. I'll just put my video on again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it seemed that I wanted her to then, go out and treat people that were different from her in a better way or something. It was too abrupt. Just the apology.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanted it to influence her in a deeper way than just getting the flowers for her wedding.
Yeah.
But it might be just the way the culture of the story as opposed to maybe a Western story. I don't know. I found your first story difficult. I actually had a friend, Rabina, in Toronto, tell that story in a set she did with me, and
Mm-hmm.
we all had trouble making sense of it. And I don't know whether it was culturally that first story you did.
Yeah.
This story,
What did you find
the
difficult
second
about the
story, I
first?
understood it better.
What about the first story didn't quite make sense?
Um, it was like, how was the man holy and then makes a curse? Some of the parts didn't fit for us.
Well,
Now, on further explanation, we might have gotten it, but
listen, I'm a very holy person, and sometimes I lose my temper.
are you?
Talk to my
Yeah.
wife and daughter. Maybe I
Anyway,
shouldn't have called him holy. I should have called him a sage, perhaps, or an ascetic.
perhaps that would have probably. But I enjoyed the second story. I could make more sense of it than the first story, and that's just cultural thing, I think.
Yeah,
But
I
I'm
think.
glad you explained about the flowers, because I remember my friend also explaining how the marigold flowers and everything were so important, and I hadn't known that. So it's always nice to learn more things about a culture for sure.
Mhm. Okay, so I'll call the man who comes and give the curse. I call him an ascetic. Most people know that word, aesthetic. It's sort of
Yeah.
a fancy word, but all right. Okay, so it didn't sit right that I called him a holy person. I get it. All right, so the fish brother, uh, he had to get justice. That fish had to get justice, and he felt he got it. Even though, as you say, in a sense, it was a forced apology, but he accepted it. Okay, shall we go on to the next story? Cinderella. I don't think I have to give a summary of that. The most popular fairy tale in the world. Versions in a zillion different languages, and probably did not spread, probably just grew independently all over the world. A true archetypal story of a young person who is in a bad situation, but she is kind and patient and takes the abuse. And then the inciting incident, the ball. The prince wants to marry a young lady in the land. That's a big shakeup, right? And all the young ladies are lining up. And nobody except Cinderella considers the possibility that Cinderella might be in contention also. But when she raises that idea, she gets smashed down by her stepmother and two older stepsisters. But she doesn't lose her temper. She still makes their dresses. She's very kind-hearted and humble and gentle and patient. And that is probably why, after they've gone to the ball, the mother and the sisters have gone to the ball, she's still kind of wishing. And the fairy godmother appears. Now, you know, we're all not such big fans of magical thinking, right? But in this case, that fairy godmother, I see the fairy godmother as a reflection, as a manifestation of Cinderella's goodness and kindness. That she earned that fairy godmother with her good nature. There are other versions of the story that she's kind to animals, little animals, and they help her. So whether it's she's kind in general or she's kind to animals, she is definitely a kind, humble person. And so she goes to the ball, and then the all is lost moment. Ding, ding, ding. The clock is striking 12, and she has to run. She can't even give her visiting card to the king, to the prince. She has to run, and all seems to be lost. But then he moves into action. He visits every home in the land with the one slipper that fell on the staircase. He does a lot of work. See, the model that I presented to you is that at some point, some character steps into action, is proactive. And up to that point, the prince had just been a passive receptor of all these beautiful ladies coming. But now he makes a real effort to find his love, and he does. So any thoughts about this story in light of the ideas? I'm saying that the ball and the prince wanted to get married. That's the big hook or inciting incident, because we want to go too. We want the prince to marry us, don't we? We'll have a good, easy life after that. So we're hooked. We want to know if we're the one that the prince is going to marry. I do. I'm ready. And then all seems to be lost when she has to run away. Any other thoughts about how this story relates to the dramatic principles or the character development principles? I don't know that Cinderella's character develops in this story because she's so good and kind from the beginning and determined.
Eric, when there is one aspect of good and kindness, there is also another. Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. When there is one aspect of good and kindness, there's also another aspect of, being subjugative. And this is the reason why I don't usually tell these kind of fairy tales to children, because probably, the kind of example you said, she bears all the torture, she's being teased and she doesn't open her mouth. And the kind of, always a prince has to come and rescue. So,
no, the fairy godmother rescues her.
Yes.
Which can be
again,
seen as a
in the end,
manifestation of the universe,
Yeah.
rewarding her for her strength. But I hear what you're saying. You feel that she's too gentle. She puts up with
The
too much.
stepmother concept, the stepsisters ill-treating. Somewhere it doesn't have a very positive side to take it to kids. So I generally don't do fairy tales with children. And fairy tales have become like, I prefer more of contemporary or folk tales or animal stories rather than fairy tales.
Well, there are many different types of fairy tales, but okay, fair enough. Any thoughts about?
But she doesn't speak up for herself. So, these days children are so smart. You can never find anybody accepting, like, okay, you can be kind, but at the same time, it's okay if you bear torture. So I don't know how to, present Cinderella's character.
Well, she speaks up for herself in the sense of continuing to wish. But the wish is not really action, but in her case, she was fortunate that her wish manifested. Her wish came true. Okay, there's a little sound interference. If it's you, please put off your mic. But how would you know if it was you? Mary Louise, go ahead.
Another aspect to that story that it doesn't quite fit your scheme or whatever
Mhm.
is she's reliant on the fact that Prince looks for the slipper and finds her at home, and the slipper doesn't fit anybody else, and that's a kind of a passive role in a sense. It's not one of my favorite stories either, because it seems like her reward is to become a princess, and the prince doesn't really do very much. I mean, it's true he looks for her, but it's like a patriarchal type of bent where everything comes from the prince. You know, she's got to marry the prince, and he has to look for her. And I don't know, I can kind
Everything
of
comes from the fairy godmother,
well, but
which
the
is a
prince,
manifestation of her character.
I guess we
Fairy
could probably,
godmothers don't come to anybody. They only come to people who deserve it.
yes, but what I'm saying is, in the end, it's the prince looking for her that gets her there.
Okay.
She doesn't do anything after that. That's all I'm saying. It's not a it's it's a story that you could really have, as you say, a lot of discussion about. But
Okay.
yeah.
Shall we
Well,
move on?
that's also
Ah,
that's the most well-known contemporary version of Cinderella, but there's a lot of other versions to it. Like in the Russian version, there's no fairy godmother, it's Father Winter. And Cinderella goes and rests under a tree to escape her stepmother and her stepsisters. Father Winter tries to freeze her to death, but can't because of her purity and goodness, and rewards her with a sled full of gold and furs. The
mhm.
stepmother and the stepsisters go into the forest and sit under the tree, and he turns them into popsicles because they are not pure. So there are other versions, and because basically we're looking at like the Grimm's brothers version of Cinderella. And so there are other versions where she's not quite as passive and she's not quite as helpless.
Mhm. And that is a popular story element, that the wicked are destroyed by something that does not destroy the good. In Vasilisa, the Baba Yaga gives fire to the good young person, which doesn't hurt her, but it destroys the wicked people who are harassing the young lady. All right. One more fairy tale, and then Lilitha, your story. The other fairy tale is Rumpelstiltskin. The opening incident is that her father, all of you feminists out there like me will not like this. Her father is a good-for-nothing guy who likes to brag. My daughter can spin straw into gold. He likes to brag about it. There's no reality to it. It's not true. He likes to talk. And the local king hears it, and he says, okay, send her to the palace, and I'm going to put her in a room. And if she doesn't turn it into gold, she's going to die. So the young lady says, Father, what did you do? And he says, sorry, dear. So she goes, so she's taken off to that room in the court, in the castle, in the palace, with a big pile of straw, and the door is locked, and she thinks her life is over. But an odd little man appears, and she says, how did you get in here? He says, don't worry about that. He says, I'll spin the straw into gold, but you have to give me a payment. What can I give you? What do you want? He says, I'll take your necklace, your gold necklace. And he works all night, spins the straw into gold. We don't really know the meaning of that today because we don't have spinning wheels. But when this story was created, spinning wheels were very common. Everybody knew what it meant, and everybody knew the ridiculousness of spinning straw into gold. But okay, in the morning, there's a big pile of gold thread, and the king says, well done, young lady. I want you to do it again with in a room twice as big with twice as much straw. And by the way, if you don't do it, you'll be killed again. So she says, what? So she's really suffered. Her father is a no good, and this king is a no good. But there it is. So the king leaves and locks the door. The little man appears again and says, okay, I'll do it, but you've got to give me your ring. And she says, oh, this is my favorite ring, my only ring. All right, I'll give it to you. And she gives it to him, and he spins the straw. In the morning, the king comes and says, she says, okay, king, I've done it twice. Can you please let me go home? And the king says, no, I'm putting you in an even bigger room with even more straw. And if you don't do it this time, again, you'll die. But if you succeed, you can marry my son. This king is a troublesome character, a difficult character. We're not going to approve of this king. But anyway, that's his condition. So the king leaves, the little man comes, and the little man says, all right, what are you going to give me this time? And she says, I don't have any more jewelry. The little man says, well, the king said if you succeed, you can marry his son. I'll fix it so you can succeed, but I want your firstborn child. She said, what? I can't give you my firstborn child. He says, that's what you're going to have to give me, and the deal's settled. So he begins to do the work, and by morning it's all done. And he says, that's it. You have to give me your firstborn child. And she said, no, I never agreed to it. And he said, the work is done. The deal is made. I'll come back for my child. So he goes, and the prince comes a little later, and the prince is very mild-mannered, and he apologizes to the young lady the way his father's been treating her, and they like each other, and they get married, and they have a child. One day when the prince is out, and the father passes away shortly after the wedding, so the prince becomes king, and this young lady becomes queen. And so one day when the young king is away, the young queen is there with her baby, and the little man appears. The little man says, I've come for my payment. And she said, but I never agreed. He said, you took advantage. You took the benefit. Your life was saved. You married the prince. Now you've got to pay. So she says, no, please, please. And then he says, okay, I'll give you 3 chances. Nobody knows my name, so I'll give you 3 days to find out my name. If you don't find out my name in 3 days, I'm taking the child. So the first 2 days, she looks in books. She talks to all the experts, but she doesn't get the name right. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, or maybe it was the night before the 3rd day, she leaves the palace. I guess it was the night before the 3rd day. She goes walking in the forest. She has an intuition, or she has a desperation. She's looked everywhere. She's looked in the library. She's looked everywhere she can, and now she just goes off into the woods, searching to try to find the character's name. And lo and behold, deep in the forest, she comes upon a fire in the distance, and she hides behind a tree and sees that it's the little man, and he's dancing around the fire, and he sings a song which ends, and my name is Rumpelstiltskin. She'll never guess. He sings to himself. So she goes back to the palace. The little man comes the next day. She plays dumb. She says, is your name this? Is your name that? Is your name this? He says, I'm giving you one more chance. Stop wasting my time. And then she says, by any chance is your name Rumpelstiltskin? How did you know? And he was so angry, he stamped his foot down. It went through the floor, and he lifted his other leg with his arm and pulled it up with such a jerk that he split himself in 2 and died instantly. and was given a nice funeral. And the young lady and the young man and the child lived happily. Okay, so inciting incident and hook. That jerk of a father was bragging about his daughter, putting her in a very dangerous position. But if he hadn't done that, the whole story wouldn't have happened, and she never would have become queen. You see, that's how antagonists can work in stories. At the moment, it's horrible, it's a disaster, but it can lead to wonderful results. Okay, then there are many all is lost moments, right? When before she meets the little man, she thinks all is lost. When she can't figure out the name, all seems to be lost. But I think the key moment in the story is when she leaves the palace. She goes out into the forest alone. That's where she moves into action. And by good fortune or good intuition, that leads to the resolution of the story in her favor. So I think it follows the proactive main character idea. Anybody, any thoughts about the story? Does it follow any other aspect of the models? Are you angry at the father? It's a little similar to the Handless Maiden, where the father there also gets his daughter in trouble. June.
Eric, I've never heard this version where she goes out in the forest. I've only heard the version where she sends out a hunter into the forest. So that changes just a little. Who, takes the chance, but
I'm aware of both versions, but the version I told fits the model better.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I think I've made a pretty good case that some of these principles have some relation to reality in relation to a number of these stories, haven't I? Then wouldn't you agree that there's some sort of hook or inciting incident usually at the beginning, and often a pinch or two along the way, and the plot thickening, and all is lost moment, and then resilience, and then proactivity on the part of the character. But again, I'm not suggesting you write that you create stories to fit this model. These models are just something to ponder over after you've created something, and maybe adjust what you've done a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to go to the last story. Wait a minute, June, I'm taking down your hand. Good. Okay.
Thank you.
This is Change Begins at Home by Lalitha, who is with us, and I'm going to put I put her story, Lalitha. I put your story on a web page. I'll put the link in the chat. I don't want to put it there now because people will read it and it'll be a distraction. Please let me give a summary of it, and then at the end I'll give a link to the original.
Sure, Eric.
So this story is about a young woman, a student. What standard would she say? Lalitha, I think there's an issue with your audio.
Yeah, I've unmuted, Eric. Can you hear me?
No, let me mute you. Yeah, now you're muted, and the interference stops. Somehow when your mic is on, there's a little interference. It's okay. but only turn it on when you're going to speak, and then after that, turn it off. Okay. So Deepta is the young lady. It seems is she in 10th standard or 11th standard?
10th grade.
10th.
10th grade.
Okay. Yep. And at the very beginning, her mother asks, "Why is the bag you're carrying so heavy?" That's the hook. And the girl says, I picked up a lot of newspapers that were scattered on the floor at school because they were gifted to the school by the newspaper company, but these other students were not reading it and they just were wasting it, and it was all scattered on the floor. So I picked it all up, and I'm going to take it to the paper recycling person, because this young lady is very conscious about environmental issues. A big champion of reuse, recycle, and so forth. Reduce, recycle, and reuse. And her struggle in the story is to convince her mother and her grandmother to take this seriously. And for example, the washing machine, when it sends out water, it just goes down the drain. But the Deepta, her name is, she says to her mother, "We can use that water to water the plants." But her mother doesn't always remember to put a pot underneath the pipe, the hose, taking water out of the washing machine. And the daughter finally gets so disappointed and frustrated that her mother is not cooperating, that her mother is not diligently saving the water, that the daughter says to the mother, "Mother, I feel like a total failure. I can't even convince you, my own mother, to follow these simple things. How will I ever convince anybody? I'm a failure." And the mother feels so bad because the mother is protective of her daughter and loves her daughter and doesn't want her daughter to feel crushed. So her mother, in effect, says, "Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I really will collect the water properly from now on." So the mother undergoes a change in this case. And then we move on to the grandmother. The grandmother is burning dead plants in the backyard.
Garden debris.
Debris, yeah, plant.
Garden debris.
Yeah, debris. She's burning it, and that causes a lot of pollution. But the grandmother says, "What else can we do? It's too expensive to have it shipped away." And the daughter goes on hunger strike. She says, "I'm not going to eat because of what you're doing, because you're polluting the air." And she goes on hunger strike for at least a day until the grandmother finally relents and says, "All right, okay, I'll follow your instructions, because I don't want you. In effect, I don't want you committing suicide." So the daughter wins. I don't know. She doesn't win over the grandmother, but she forces the grandmother to go along with the program. And then the very last line of the story is that the mother is so happy that her daughter has succeeded in convincing the mother and the grandmother that, and this is why the mother has told this story to you. So it turns out the mother is telling this whole story about her daughter because she's proud of her daughter and protective of her daughter, and she tells the story. So the story begins by being about the daughter, but it kind of shifts where it becomes about the mother, or it's about both of them. Am I right about that, Lalitha?
Yeah, the story is predominantly about the little girl trying to make the changes. So that is what I wanted to bring out. And then when she's doing that, then because it was my own daughter, in the end, I wanted to reveal, yes, it's because she's none other than my daughter.
Well, I don't know that it's your daughter, but the last line of the story is, "This is the reason that I, the mother of this girl, that I'm telling the story to you." because
This is the reason
the
I
girl
tell my
triumphs.
stories.
Anyway,
I
the
first
focus shifts from the daughter to the mother
Okay.
to some degree. Okay, so does this story, how does it relate to our ideas about character and drama? Do you agree that the opening scene of her coming home with a big bag full of dirty papers, that's a pretty good hook, right? Because, you know, people, middle and upper class people are, in India especially, are not supposed to pick up trash. I pick up trash and I get a lot of ridicule for it. I'm the keeper of our local trash bins to make sure that it stays relatively clean, but my wife doesn't like it. Anyway, so the opening thing is she's bringing home this paper and explaining to her mother that she's going to take it to the paper mart. Lalitha, do you have any other thoughts about how you know, how this story fits into these dramatic ideas?
The turning point of the story would be where she says she's a complete failure, and that changes the mother.
Yes, and then again, I'm going on hunger strike, and that changes the behavior of the grandmother.
That changes the grandmother.
So she uses
And, yeah.
she uses kind of a, with the grandmother, it's emotional blackmail. But with the mother, it's the mother's love for her daughter and not wanting her daughter to feel crushed. Wait, I'm going to put into the chat section. Participants, chat section here. Chat. The link to the story. There it is. Anyone, if you'd like to read the full story, please copy that link. And Lalitha, your contact information is not there, but do you want to give your email ID? You want to post your email
Yeah,
ID?
I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. We're coming to the end of this session. And this is going to happen 3 more times in this workshop. Tomorrow it's going to happen with the Shakespeare's The Tempest for the whole session, because The Tempest is my favorite play in the world for the last 50 years. I have a lot to say about The Tempest, and we'll look at The Tempest in terms of these ideas. And then next week we'll look at the Tamil story, which is called an epic, the Epic of the Anklet, which is also one of my favorite stories. It's really the reason I moved to South India, because I said, I have to live where this story lives. And then, so tomorrow is Saturday, it'll be The Tempest. Then next Friday, it'll be the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet from Tamil Nadu. And then the last session a week from tomorrow is the movie that I've written and I'm trying to get produced. It's called Words from the Forest. It all takes place in the forest, so it'll be an examination of the archetype of the forest and the drama that happens in the forest. Anybody, any thoughts about anything? Come on, we've been here for 1 hour. Please share any thoughts.
Eric?
Go ahead.
Yes, Eric Suvarna here. At the beginning, when you started speaking, you did mention the role of unconscious, when the stories are getting created. So could you put, like speak a little bit about that? Like,
well, in the first session or the second session, and all these sessions are recorded. If you look at my my flyer, there's a link to the recordings. We did 2 creativity activities. One called Active Imagination, which really was developed by Carl Jung, where you ask your unconscious In traditional societies, somebody might have asked a god or a goddess. But in this case, in the world of psychology, you ask your unconscious to send up something that might be interesting, that you might be able to learn from. And the metaphor that I like to use is being in a boat and looking down at the water, and asking your unconscious to send something up that might be interesting. Just like at night, the unconscious sends a dream sometimes. A dream can be seen as a story that the unconscious tells to the consciousness. And there may be a point to it. The unconscious may want the consciousness to get something from that dream. And likewise, what the unconscious sends up when you do this activity, it's called active imagination, because you're actively asking for something to come up. And then Carl Jung recommends having a conversation with that thing. If it's a thing, you personify it. You pretend that it has life and speech ability, and you talk to it. You have a conversation. And so you're role-playing both sides, both you and the thing that comes up. So that's a creativity play where many professional creative people do that every day. When they get to their desk, they do that as a sort of meditation and just to see what is coming up out of their unconscious that day. So does that answer your question, that example?
Definitely very interesting, and I'm definitely going to read up a little more about this. I missed the session probably, but I'll listen to the recording. Thank you so much.
Sure. Anybody else? Comments, questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Eric. Ramya here. I'm sorry I'm not able to switch on the camera, but I missed the earlier sessions, but this one was extremely interesting. It reminds me, I mean, I was there at your workshop when we did story therapy a few years ago, and everything, all these active imagination and everything we did in detail during the workshop. So taking the stories and breaking them down into, different models that you brought was very interesting. I think it's a wonderful exercise that we storytellers have to do, so that we always reinvent and work on the story differently. It also helps us tell the story differently, the point of view, the hook, and the other things that you brought. So it was wonderful exercise to, go through these points at the stories. Yeah.
But, never feel a necessity to follow these models. These models are just suggestions, ideas, observations, but it's not the way anyone creates anything. You create by feeling and by imagination, not by formula.
Right.
Okay, so we'll end the session. It's not just you and me, Jeff, although you and I are the only ones. Oh, there's Lalitha. Yeah, there are 14 people here, but they're probably in the kitchen. Oh, June, good. Okay. Shall we say good night and good morning? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, try to come back 23 hours from now for a good look at The Tempest by William Shakespeare and these dramatic and character ideas. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night, Eric.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Good day.